What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to episode 6 of Bound to Improve. My name is Landon Eller.
And I'm Chris Pound. This week we decided to read Your Next 5 Moves by Patrick Bet-David. Very interesting, a lot of good points, and it was a very dense book in regards of the knowledge that you can take away from it. And so why don't we kind of talk about the implementation from last week?
Yeah, before we get into it here, if you're checking us out on YouTube, got a little bit different setup this week. This should be pretty regular from here on out for the most part. So we'll work on what you're seeing behind us.
Yeah, and coordinating. We didn't
talk before this. But anyways, get into the implementation segment. So both of ours last week was understand some of our micro motives. So I picked out two that I discovered, and one was the opposite of complacency. So I always have to be like working on the next big thing per se. The second one I kind of discovered was the need for variety. I have no desire to do the same thing day in and day out. So it has to be like new, exciting.
Yeah, so my implementation from Dark Horse was trying to understand more of my personal micro motives. And with doing that, I would have to say my biggest one by far would be I'm very family oriented. I like to spend time with my family. And at the end of the day, I just want to make my family proud. And so knowing that on a deeper level, I think I'll really be able to encompass what I can do in order for that micro motive to shine, I would say.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, once again, this is an ever-evolving process. Both Chris and I will have to continuously assess ourselves and keep finding our micro motives to kind of determine what we want to do and how we find fulfillment. So before we get into the book here, we'll give a little introduction into who Patrick Bet-David is. He grew up in the capital city of Iran, which is Tehran, and he grew up during the Iran-Iraq War, and his parents made a pivotal decision, and they realized that they had to get out to see any benefits for their family in the future. So they ended up leaving Iran and went to a refugee camp in Germany and spent 2 years there before moving over to California. And growing up, he was not the student you would say was...
No, not a straight A student by any means.
He had a 1.8 GPA, 880 on his SAT, and he didn't even know what was out there for him. So he just enrolled in the military right after school. Yeah. And he ended up dropping out of the military at age 20 because he wanted to be kind of the Middle Eastern Arnold.
Yeah. He wanted to be a bodybuilder.
Yeah. So the path he took to be that was he got a job at Bally Gym.
Yeah, no. So Patrick Bet-David is actually like a massive human being. He's like 6'4", stocky guy. So I mean, he definitely had the capability to become the next Arnold. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. However, we are now able to kind of learn from the things that he's experienced in his life.
Yeah. He ended up starting his own insurance company, and he now runs one of the largest channels for entrepreneurship on YouTube called Valuetainment. Now kind of transitioning into the structure of the book. So it was broken up into 15 chapters with 5 main moves.
Yeah. And so the whole purpose of the book was you have your next 5 steps. And how you're going to use these next 5 steps will ultimately dictate your total outcome, I would say. So the first move here was know yourself. The second step was ability to reason. And then it goes into building the right team, and then strategy to scale, and then the power plays were the last step. And so we'll kind of go into more of an in-depth talk about those here in a little bit.
Yeah.
Why don't you hit the intro?
And this episode is going to be a little bit different structure. We'll kind of hit on the summary of the book, and in tandem, we'll do our personal takeaways as we go through it, because it's just so packed that we didn't think we had time to do 2 distinct sections. So going right into the intro, Patrick starts off with a chess analogy, and he says that business is like chess, and you have to be like a grandmaster, being able to see 15 moves ahead. Now, if you listen to the last episode, this completely contradicts what Todd Rose was talking about in Dark Horse. But I think the key word that that Patrick used was business.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, like I resonate more with Patrick's.
I definitely resonate more with Dark Horse, I would say. Because I'm not really in the position right now to be starting a business, I would say. But I guess depending on where you're at in your life, either one of these books will definitely help you improve in whichever avenue you're exploring at that time, I'd say.
Yeah, I just think the end destination shouldn't be set in stone, which is exactly to the Dark Horse mindset. But both personal and professionally, having the ability to know your next 5, 10, 15 steps can be instrumental in your success. And that's why I kind of resonated with Patrick's more.
Yeah. And I guess it really, like I said, it kind of goes with who you are as a person. And that's actually the very first chapter is who do you want to be? And in order to answer this question, you really have to truly understand who you are and what makes you tick. It's almost like a micro motive, right? It's exactly a micro motive. And I guess kind of along with that, he hit on the point of a non-negotiable. And everybody has different non-negotiables, and that can be in business and health and friendships and relationships. You can really apply it to just about any portion of your life. It's just things that you feel very strongly about, and you're not willing to give up ground on those subjects or those principles. Those would be your micro motives and your non-negotiables from that standpoint.
Yeah, kind of like what you're willing and not willing to sacrifice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one more thing that I took away from this first chapter, who do you want to be, is as motivation, he talked about not only using optimism or like praise, but also to use pessimism or negativity against you. To that extent, don't carry around that negativity. You have to use it almost as like rocket fuel, he used as an analogy to boost you forward, but you cannot let that weigh on your shoulder as you move around.
Yeah, he kind of had the same mindset of Goggins, I'd say. I don't know if I'm sure a lot of people know who David Goggins is. And he has a very interesting philosophy on motivation. And so what he'll do is he'll put together like a playlist of just his voiceover going over mean comments that he's received. And it's just him saying these mean comments to him while he's on the run, and it kind of hypes him up and motivates him. If that's how you're wired, and that's how you get fueled up and ready to move on with your feet down and your head down, and you're just running along, that's what you have to do. But I mean, it really depends on who you are as a person, I think.
100%. Yeah, I think moving into chapter 2 here is study the most important product you, and this directly correlates to chapter 1. Getting to know yourself requires effort, and it's not easy at all. Ben Franklin said there are 3 things that are extremely hard: steel, diamond, and knowing oneself. And I don't think that could be any closer to the truth.
Yeah, no, diamonds are extremely durable. So,
yeah, and like going back to how it connects with the Dark Horse mindset, alignment is the key to fulfillment. You have to align your vision, your values, everything to what you want to be, and really aspire to do that. And another thing he kind of mentioned in this chapter is people get caught up in distractions, for example, like social media, but really they are choosing to get caught up in this to escape the reality of knowing oneself. And I thought that was kind of an interesting way to look at it.
So you're talking more of like a purpose level, like what you find purpose in?
So most people get like caught up in social media, end up spend hours, days just scrolling. He describes like, oh, I got distracted.
And do you feel like that takes away from actually finding what fulfills you and what your true purpose is supposed to be?
I think that's what Patrick was arguing, is that's what people use to escape
reality
and trying to understand oneself.
That makes perfect sense. Going along here, chapter 3 is path to creating wealth. Intrapreneur or entrepreneur. So entrepreneur is going out and creating something brand new, and you own it. It's your company, this and that, your product. And entrepreneur is, you have your spot in an organization, and your only job is to create new business for that organization. And there are a couple different ways that you can really use the entrepreneurship to your advantage. One, you already have structure, right? You don't have to rely on yourself, or maybe one or two employees who you don't fully know or trust. And we'll hit a lot on the trust aspect here in a little bit. But I guess as an entrepreneurship, you're always worried about money. And so the thing with the entrepreneurship that really can help somebody create something great and really help people with is the fact that they already have an organization working behind them. And so you already have the funding. And if you're able to really create a product and make your organization money, they'll fully back you. So I think it's really trying to, again, it's really understanding yourself. Do you want to spend the 80 hours a week trying to build your own business and your own brand, or would you rather spend 40 to 60 hours a week building a business or a brand within a brand? And I really think that the latter of the two would be easier.
Yeah, it's really comes down to who do you want to be.
Yeah.
And like off of that, depending on like what business you decide to create, you have to find a game that you're able to win. Use the analogy of blue ocean. So when you're out in the middle of the ocean and you look around, what's there, Chris?
More ocean, more blue ocean, I'd say.
Nothing, essentially. Like no other players are in that space. So try to find somewhere where you can kind of captivate your own identity, like almost within an industry, so you don't have competing factors in, because that will make it extremely tough.
Yeah.
So moving into move number 2 is master the ability to reason, and chapter 4, the incredible power of processing. So the key to success for all people at all levels of business is to know how to process issues. Life is always happening, and the way you respond is based on how you process issues. It goes back to Marcus Aurelius's mental resiliency, being able to control the events and the impact that they have, like on your mindset, on your emotions, etc. And great processors also use I. They take accountability.
Yeah.
For your actions. No matter what happened, you always have to find a way to ask like the question, how did I make this happen, or how can I make this go away in the future?
Yeah. How could I improve?
Yeah.
It's not, when you're a leader, it's not someone else's fault. It's always your fault. You have to take responsibility for whether it could be a success, but there are a lot of times where there's a mistake. And a good leader will take that heat and that responsibility from the situation that they were involved with.
Yeah, and there's an interesting analogy there. Use the dating analogy, and if you end up always dating girls that are crazy, that is a reflection of you. You're making those choices on which the girls you go out and date, which ones, where do you go to meet them at. So like again, taking that accountability and always asking like, how do you improve?
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder, are the girls crazy, or am I crazy for
exactly
pursuing the women that I'm pursuing? Yeah, it's an interesting topic there. Here we go into chapter 5, which was how to solve for X, a methodology for effective decision making. No matter how old you are, I would say people in math have experience trying to solve for X. And there are about a million different ways to solve for X regarding what kind of equation it is and this and that. But in X in a business, the first thing you have to understand is, what is X? X is an issue, right? And it can be literally anything. But the main thing is you have to understand the issue. If you don't understand what the issue is, you're not going to be able to come up with a solution. And if you can't come up with a solution relatively quick, then it's not only going to frustrate you that you can't come up with a solution, but it's going to cost you money and possibly clients and maybe even the business side.
Yeah, you have to really isolate that X, just like you do in algebra. Get it on one side and see what it equals to directly. And that'll help you isolate your problem. Always drill down and find that deepest reason of why. And even though it sounds so easy, like when we're just sitting here talking about it, or when we sit there and read about it,
Mm-hmm.
really putting this into practice is kind of what distinguishes people who are able to solve problems effectively and those who are not.
Yeah, and there was actually a quote in that chapter that really resonated with me, and it was, your way of thinking got you to where you are today, right? And in order for things to change, your way of thinking needs to change, and that's extremely hard. What was it, Benjamin Jefferson saying that Benjamin Franklin had the three, the diamond, the knowing yourself, and stealing.
Steal, like the material.
I thought it was steal. I guess stealing something from someone else would be pretty easily, but now it makes sense that it was steal. Like I steal.
Like all things are hard.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. But yeah. I mean, you've been so engraved on doing things your way.
The formula, like the
Exactly. And in order to come up with a better alternative, you have to completely change the way you think about things.
Yeah, 100%. Now moving into move number 3 here, master building the right team. And chapter 6 starts off with the myth of the solopreneur, how to build your own team. So you have to be able to answer the question, why should someone work for you? Essentially, you have to give them a reason to buy you. At that early stage, at that entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship per se, they're not really buying the company almost. They're buying what you can do, not only monetary wise, but also just like credibility wise and how they seem when people associate with like you, the entrepreneur.
Yeah, you're really trying to sell yourself. Why would someone just randomly give you money? It's because one, you might be a very reasonable, likable person, and the more personable you can come off to somebody, the more odds that people are going to like you. And when people like you, they're willing to help to back you up in a business that you want to start.
Yeah, and then 3 more quick takeaways from this chapter is you always have to when hiring, you always have to be wary about the people you're hiring. You can't trust anyone, essentially. You always have to do your due diligence and really get behind the scenes, understand who the person is, what their motives are. And once they're hired, you have to treat your people right, or someone else will. There's always headhunters out there looking to snatch those people from your organization, especially the really good ones. And that kind of goes back to the re-recruiting aspect. That's a process that never ends. You have to constantly be re-recruiting your people to help them stay, and so you can build your team the right way and effectively.
And he was actually able to incorporate the different types of love languages and being able to apply them to his employees, not in like a weird way, but if someone is satisfied from hearing like a sincere affirmation from somebody, then they're just going to continue to excel. If someone likes gifts and you have your number one salesperson kicking butt, maybe you give them a watch, maybe you give them vacation, but just knowing what makes your employees kind of tick and put that fire in them will ultimately not only benefit them, but it's going to benefit you and your business as well.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah. So going on to chapter 7 here is create a principle-based culture. We have been drilling down on culture for these last couple of books. And like I had mentioned before, I hear culture, I don't know what it means. And having the opportunity that I had this summer, I saw culture. And I've now seen good culture and I've seen bad culture. He has a philosophy that says that having a principle-based culture means that you can hold everybody to the same standards. And what was it? Complete transparency or radical transparency. If you see someone doing something wrong,
call them out for it.
Call them out. Not only does this kind of, I wouldn't say puts people on edge, but it's peer pressure, right?
Positive peer pressure.
And when there's positive peer pressure, you're going to get the most out of your employees. And when you're getting the most out of your employees, you're going to get the most for your business.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, he also argues like friction is good in a culture. It's healthy and it stimulates growth, creativity, and learning at the same time. So I think that works hand in hand with creating that positive peer pressure.
Yeah, a lot of people like to compete with each other, and if one person is able to kind of get a head start on someone else, well, then that person's going to work even harder to get above their peer, and so that really, again, reinstates the positive peer pressure aspect.
Yeah. Now moving on to chapter 8, trust equals speed, the power of reliability. And this is where like that trust aspect comes in big time. You have to be cautious about trusting any team member, no matter like if you're just hiring them, how long they've been in your business. Always be wary about the people around you and who you put the most trust in. So he argues that if you have trust, this will lead to speed. And So like speed equals momentum, and fuel equals like the money or capital, and the pilot equals a founder or your CEO or entrepreneur. And he uses like an airplane analogy. What happens if your airplane's going and all of a sudden you start losing that trust, that reliability, or that momentum? If you're on an airplane,
You're going down.
you're going down. And that's the same with the business you're in. And on top of that, you can't lead people if you don't know who they are. Going back to understanding their micromotives, their love languages. And how he does this is by asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
He really asks deep questions to understand them on a personal level. And he kind of argued that like asking those deep questions, even though they might hit a nerve, that's when they start answering those, that's the truest form of themselves. So you're really understanding who they are as a person.
He kind of takes a page out of Dale Carnegie's. He's genuinely interested in what his employees like and what they don't like. And many of the meetings that he's had with his employees, he always start with, what do you want? Not necessarily like, what do you want, but it's like, what do you want with your life, with your,
like, what are your next 5
steps? What fulfills you? And that having the ability to be 100% transparent with your employees, it gives you the trust to know that they're going to make decisions that not only benefit themselves, but also benefit you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're ready to move on to move 4.
Yeah, move 4 here is master strategy to scale. And so chapter 9 here is scaling for exponential growth. Okay, so we have linear growth and we have exponential. Linear looks like this. Exponential, I suppose that's the best way I can probably put it, right? They go just random.
Yeah.
And so from this chapter, the biggest thing that I had was that Jack Welch, which straight from the gut, CEO of GE, and Patrick Bet-David both agree that you cannot lose your A players. You have too much into them, and they provide you too much to be able to afford to lose them. Now, like I said, Jack Welch, he calls them A players, but Patrick Bet-David calls them lions. And when you're thinking who's the king of the jungle, it's a lion. And so, he's the top of the food chain. That's your A player. You cannot afford to lose these type of people because they provide too much.
Yeah, and I'm going to hit on a whole bunch of key points that you brought up. Going back to that linear and exponential. So the linear kind of consists of your operating systems, and also your business development. So that's maintaining your relationships, creating new leads in the pipeline, and those operating systems are your everyday processes. Without either one of these, your business will ultimately fail. So you need both. And the exponential side of it is innovative campaigns. What's the next big thing that's going to bring in revenue for your business? Also, leadership development. You have to be able to foster leaders within your organization. Going back to like Jack Welch, he assigned mentors to all the people that he saw had a lot of potential. So that's just one example of a way that you can develop leadership within your organization. And the last thing I had here was he was Bill Belichick, the coach of the Patriots.
Prior coach to the Patriots.
Sorry. You have to be able to apply pressure, especially to your A players, not to the point that it kills them, breaks them, but to a point like where they're up to the point. It pushes them to
maximizing their potential.
And once you keep applying this pressure, like Bill Belichick did to all of his players, for example, Tom Brady, it turns them into diamonds.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Did you want to hit on chapter 10 or?
Yeah. So chapter 10 is make momentum your friend and be prepared for chaos. So one of the main things I took away is use Amazon's CEO,
Jeff Bezos.
Regret minimization. So project yourself forward in time and think about what you might regret not having done. And I think a quote that really encapsulates this is Wayne Gretzky's, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." So
I thought that was MJ. No, I'm just kidding. I saw it.
Scared me there for a second. And then essentially going back to that chaos piece is to entrepreneurship is as dangerous waves are to surfing. It comes with territory. If you don't know how to handle it effectively, you are in trouble. So being able to know how to successfully ride the waves in those times of turmoil will be essential to you as a person and to your business as a whole.
Let's quickly hit on the 4 G's that can destroy a person. Do you know what they are?
I'm gonna try to remember them off the top of my head.
Okay.
Greed.
Okay.
Gluttony.
Okay.
Girls or guys.
Yep. Okay.
And gambling.
Gambling. Exactly. Now, I don't know. Do you know the 3 L's? Charlie Munger's 3 L's. He said there are 3 L's that would destroy a young man. That's how he classifies it. Do you know what they are?
Love?
No. The 3 L's in Charlie Munger's eyes, and I'll kind of put the two together here in a second, but it's ladies, girls,
or guys.
Guys. Well, but L. Whatever, I see what you're saying.
Lads.
Yeah, lads. Okay, ladies or lads. Leverage, which is like debt, and then liquor. And gambling and liquor can kind of go hand in hand, I'd say. But moving on here, Chapter 11, Moneyball: Designing Systems to Track Your Business. I guess to really encompass this entire idea, it's kind of like a progression picture from the gym, right? When you first start out. And you're not happy with where you're at, where your body's at, where your health's at. You take a quick picture in the mirror. Regardless of how you look or how you think you look, you do it just so you can go back and after years of working on yourself, and again as a business, you can go back and see where you started at. Right? It's a benchmark. This is This is where I started. Where have I gone? And so he really hits on the fact that measure anything and everything that you can, and this will give you an idea of where you started, where you're headed, and potentially where you could be.
Yeah, you scared me for a second because I didn't really know where you're headed, but I think you kind of tied the loose end right there. Something I would add on to that is you have to be able to, like when you're creating systems within your business, you have to be able to codify all your knowledge. So he goes back to Coach Bill Belichick, and he also mentions Coach Bill Walsh, who was another great from the 49ers. Bill Belichick, all of his successors, they thought they were going to be the next big thing, but none of them ended up turning up any success. But Bill Walsh, on the other hand, he had a whole, I think, almost half of the coaches in late 2010s were descendants of Bill Walsh.
Yeah, there were a lot of NFL coaches that came from one leader.
And the reason because of this was because he codified all of his knowledge. He wrote down all the things that he did as a coach, all of his lists that he used to track stats, and then he passed those down, and they continue to use that. And that has to be implemented in your business. And I think I have one more point before we move on here is it's that he only uses one chapter here, but he was using systems throughout this entire book.
Yeah.
To know if a decision was a good idea, he used the ITR formula, the investment, time, return. He used to solve for problems. He used to solve for X. And there, if you end up getting the book, you'll see a worksheet that he will display in the book. And those are just 2 examples of he used as systems. So like everything he does revolves around systems, and you must be able to standardize your life in a way by creating as many systems as possible so you can focus on directing all your attention to the important stuff.
It sounds like you're not very much into the dark horse mentality.
Ooh, see, like that's where it gets me. Like I am very much a systems guy.
He's a very systems guy. He has a set schedule every single day, and if he doesn't get exactly what he had prepared for that day, it's a bad day. It's just reality. Yeah. It's a rough day if you don't get exactly what you want done that day.
Yeah.
And so I think being able to really encompass everything that we've learned so far from many of these different great authors, I'm excited to see what's to come in the future, because I know how you are. And I know the things that we've been reading pretty much completely contradict how you are. And so I'm excited to see how you kind of progress.
Yeah, thanks for calling me out on that, because like throughout this book, I kind of caught myself too in a variety of ways. Like a lot of the times this book complements, but at the same time it contradicts the dark horse mindset, and it was interesting.
Okay. Are you happy, fulfilled with where you're at right now in life? Yes or no?
I mean, I would say no.
Okay. Going back to my earlier point here, your way of thinking has gotten you to where you are today, right?
It's very true.
Okay, so in order to get yourself to where you want to be, you have to change your mindset. I think this is a perfect opportunity to really do that. I mean, we're young. We've got nothing to lose. I mean, we're out here making a podcast on a Friday night, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, just constantly try to improve, and I'm gonna hold you to that.
Heck yeah.
Because you got a lot of potential, and I plan on maximizing potential.
All right, going back into the book here is chapter 12, Stay Paranoid. The Grand Master never lets his guard down. Business is war. For businesses, peace never exists. And you can never become complacent, in the sense that someone's always willing to come and kind of knock your head off, essentially, and take your spot.
And I'll hit on that on chapter 13 a little bit. And it is the title of the chapter, or I guess move 5 here, is Master Power Plays. And so chapter 13 is titled How to Beat Goliath and Control the Narrative. Every industry has a Goliath. Goliath's a massive. And then I guess essentially every industry has a David. And so he goes on to say that, you shouldn't be complacent on where you're at in the business world as a company. And he feels that the Goliaths of the industry, they are complacent. And so knowing that there's a Goliath and that you can be the David, right? The Goliath isn't going to make risky moves. And this gives you a direct opening to make a move and to take down the Goliath. And so, like I said, the bigger risk that you can take right now, I think the better it's going to truly kind of improve your business and your life. If the more risk you take, I mean, like he said, Wayne Gretzky, you missed 100% of the shots that you don't take.
Yeah, and kind of to add on to that, to be able to really take down that Goliath, if that's what you aspire to do, yeah, you don't have to take down the Goliath in your industry if you're satisfied with where you're at. But
should never be satisfied.
I mean, everybody's got their own sense of fulfillment.
What fulfills you?
Yeah. So like you have to be locked in on your strategic focus. You have to master a few key areas, move quickly, and form alliances when necessary. So how do you do this when you got that Goliath and you're just looking up, like, how in the world do I master this? Patrick tells a story that I think kind of resonated with me. Is when he first started going to the gym, he was this scrawny kid, almost like a stick, essentially.
Not a stick anymore. He's a big man.
And one of the bigger guys kind of took him under his wing, and he started off, he couldn't even bench the bar, or he did it for very few reps. And the bodybuilder held up a 2.5 pound weight, and he's like, every week, just focus on improving.
Yeah. The little chips matter.
Yeah.
Matter.
So essentially, in your personal life and in your professional life, work on putting that 2.5 pound on that bar every single week, and you'll be surprised in a year or 2 years time of where you'll be at.
Absolutely.
So moving on to chapter 14 here is study the mobsters. How to
make deals, negotiate, and influence people.
Yeah, and influence people. So
have you ever seen The Sopranos?
No.
Oh my gosh. We'll have to watch that one. But when you think about a mob, right? What is the best thing they do? They influence people. They get to whoever they want to, and they can kind of use their tools and their tactics to negotiate and get what they ultimately want.
Yeah, and like how we kind of compared that to professional is, you have to always be prepared for every single meeting, every single negotiation that you go into. You have to do your due diligence. You have to understand how they're going to reciprocate to what you are proposing to them. And you have to appeal to their wants to really get out what you want in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much summarizes chapter 14. Chapter 14 was kind of like a long ball. You have to really know kind of. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos on mobs, and
It's fascinating.
it is extremely fascinating. Now he's not saying be a mobster, right? But
He's saying they're really smart business people.
yeah, kind of take away the tactics that they use, and you'll be able to improve your negotiations and your influence on people. Chapter 15 here is cultivate your power and stay battle tested. What does that mean? I guess my biggest takeaway from that was allow yourself to look at multiple different options. If someone comes to you and says, this is your only option, that's a red flag, right? You always have more than one option. What do they say? There are only two things that I have to do: pay taxes and die, right? You didn't even give me those options. So now I already automatically know you're lying. There are countless other options. And the more options you have, the better the decision that you're going to be able to make.
Yeah, you have to have. He argues like leverage is key in the business world, and to have leverage, you have to have those options.
Yeah.
And if you're really like dependent on one thing working out, you're essentially not going to make it any farther. For example, if you have more than 30% of your revenue coming from one customer, like that's a red flag. You have to be able to explore your options and expand those. Otherwise, your leverage is going to disseminate.
Yeah, you gotta be able to diversify your income or your stock portfolio. If you're super heavy into the large cap growth stocks, and all of a sudden if the Fed raises rates like crazy, you have to realize that those companies, they're not going to be growing as quickly as it can because their debt to equity ratio isn't going to be as good, because now they're paying more money on the debt that they already have. So it's just understanding what you have and what your other options are.
Yeah, and to really kind of make options for yourself in a sense, he argues do not use the shotgun approach. So I'm going to use another reference to like kind of the dating scene that he uses in the book. So he was like, if you go up to a girl at the bar and compliment her,
Okay.
and say like how pretty her eyes are,
Okay.
her hair is, then you may or may not end up in bed together that night. But essentially, it's just a numbers game.
Yeah.
At that point,
the more you shoot, the more options you put out there, the better result you're going to get back.
But he argues that's not an effective strategy.
Would you rather go 0 for 1 or 2 for 10?
That's not.
What would you do?
You
go 2 for 10.
Yeah, so that's not really where I was going with that kind of approach. So one time Patrick was kind of talking to this one guy who was pretty a prestigious individual, and instead of asking him, hey, like give me some leads, because at the time he was like a financial advisor, so the amount of people he came in to give them their money was huge for how he made a living. And
Patrick or the other guy?
Patrick was looking for leads or for people.
Yeah, because he was insurance. He was an insurance salesman, a life insurance salesman, which is essentially, you could pretty much say that they're a stockbroker for people's lives. But continue.
So essentially, he more asked the question like, "What can I do for you? Is there anything I can help you with?" And the guy was like, "I have a son in prison that's like 4 hours away, and no one ever goes sees him." So for a long period of time, he made the 4 hour trip multiple times. He ended up becoming like pen pals with the guy, and they eventually had lunch. I think a couple years later, and the guy asked him like, "Hey, how can I? This means the world to me and my son. Like, how can I help you?" And he's like, "Actually, I need like leads for my business." And he gave him a list of 600 people that he could use his name when contacting them. And just like that, like that opens up your options tenfold.
Yeah. So the real key from that entire story is that Patrick went into it with the idea that I don't need or want anything from this other guy. I'm just going to do this because I want to. And that's actually from Marcus Aurelius, is saying that, do something for someone else without looking for something in return.
Yeah.
And if something does happen in return, you kind of take him up on that option. But Patrick did this out of the sincerity of his heart. And this other guy saw that and noticed that it makes him more personable, it makes him more likable.
Mhm.
And so when you're more personable and likable, people are willing to help you.
Yeah. Do you have any other points here before we kind of wrap up the summary for this week?
I think we hit these 5 moves fairly efficiently.
Awesome. So we'll move into our implementation from this book. So mine was as part of like the knowing yourself, he proposed the personal identity audit, or the PIA, and he put it in the back of the book, and there's 25 questions. And I think when he did it first, when his mentor gave it to him, there was like 83 questions that he spent 8 hours on a beach
crying
over like figuring out those questions. So I don't know if it may take me 8 hours, but that's what I really want to kind of get done for this next week.
Knowing him, it'll take him 2 weeks because he likes to really think everything out, which is fine. He kind of mentions that, trying to understand yourself on a deeper level, it's scary, right? Because you have to face the things that you kind of been dealt or that you've kind of pushed away. And in order to truly know who you are as a person, you have to face those demons.
Yeah.
And so I think it would be extremely interesting because I also want to take the PIA. I wasn't going to copy his
2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, we weren't going to do that. So mine is try and really figure out what my non-negotiables are. And that can be with friendships, relationships, activities, schoolwork, right? If I know I've got an exam next week, I know I have to study, right? And if someone wants to go out for some pizza, I can't. This test is important to me, and I have to do well on it.
So how are you going to codify that knowledge? Are you going to write a list down and put 5 that you're willing to sacrifice and 5 that you're not, or like?
Well, on a non-negotiable, I won't need the things that I'm willing to sacrifice. I mean, I think the things that you're willing to sacrifice are going to come from what the other person has to say, or kind of what their non-negotiables are. I think the better way to view non-negotiables would be in like a relationship, right? What you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with.
I think you should write down a list, and I'm excited to see.
Now I can't go crazy on the non-negotiables because then that'll kind of take me away from potential people that I could meet. Right, I got to keep my mind open, but it's more about the principles that you truly live by. I think are a good way to come up with your non-negotiables.
Awesome. Yeah. Now we'll move into our quotes here. So I think we both have 2 again this week. So I'll just kick it off with this first one: is if you're going to lose, don't lose the lesson. Every master, both in chess and in business, learns more from studying moves that lead to defeat than ones that lead to victory. And I think like throughout middle school, high school, especially in sports, I really struggled with that. Like I hated losing. When we would lose, I just afterwards didn't want to do anything, didn't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to go home, go to my room, go to sleep.
Okay. With that feeling, did you feel like you were responsible for losing?
I feel like I played a part in it.
Okay. So then would you say you were a leader in that aspect? Were you a leader on your teams?
I mean, I tried to be as possible.
Hey, you did all you could do.
I did. Yeah, like you just can't lose the lesson behind.
No, yeah, you made a mistake. Now you have to learn from that mistake, I think.
Yeah.
That's a good quote.
Yeah. That's a good quote. I'll go into my second quote now here. Is you'll know when you're succeeding in life when others are winning simply because of their association with you. And like, for example, like if you're the CEO of your business and your employees underneath you, like go out to eat and they're just casually talking and with someone at the bar and they're like, oh my gosh, you work for Patrick Bet David?
Yeah.
Like, that's amazing. Like you're destined for great things. Like what that says about that CEO, like I think that's tremendous in terms of like you'll know when you're succeeding in life, when you can have that impact on other people.
Yeah, it's almost like, would you rather succeed on your own or succeed with all your friends from back home? Seeing all your buddies succeed behind you, that's a great feeling. And so I guess to me that really says that you're you care for the people who I'm not going to say are beneath you, but you care for the people who are around you. And when the people around you are succeeding, that automatically means that you're also succeeding because you're still within that group's grasp, I'd say.
Yeah.
So my two quotes here are, first one being, all your choices will dictate where you want to go. And this goes back to the very first chapter, or first move when I asked them, are you happy with where you're at? What you've done has gotten you to the point where you are today. And in order to get to where you want to be, you have to change your mindset and your view on things. And so going on, it really hits hard that, all the choices that you already have made have gotten you to where you are, right? And so you have to make difficult choices to end up where you want to be in your future. Going into my second quote here is, maintaining your integrity is always a winning strategy. If you're honest and true with the people that you associate with, you're ultimately going to get more out of the situation.
It's kind of like adhering to your principles, and in tandem with creating a principles-based culture. When people see you demonstrating your principles and living by them, they will ultimately take up those principles for themselves, kind of because they see you living by your principles on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, he pulled that from Marcus Aurelius, actually. And he goes on to say that you can really understand who someone is on a core foundation simply by the principles that they follow.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome way to put it.
That sums it up pretty much,
Yeah.
I'd say. What's next on the book list?
So the next books we are going to read is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. This was a highly recommended book to both of us by a variety of people. So we're kind of excited to see and read the Nike story and see what we can get out of it.
Yeah. Like I said, many people have recommended this to us, and so I'm interested to see what it has to offer.
Yeah. That wraps up this episode. We just want to thank you all for tuning in as we continue to carry out this podcast on a weekly basis.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. We are Bound to Improve on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify.
Awesome. Yeah. And like always, please leave feedback, suggestions, anything that you think could help us grow as what we can do to make
as individuals.
and make this podcast better.
Yeah. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.